So I'm going to present on research opportunities in sustainable e-waste management in Africa. So when we look at Africa, we have volumes of e-waste which are at alarming rate. There is research that was done in 2015, and this waste actually has kept on increasing over time. Even this particular time where we have the COVID-19, we are mostly online. You find even our learners now, they're acquiring more computers than expected. However, we have very few studies that have been conducted across our continent on the use of, despite the fact that actually we get used electronic wastes. There are some statistics that has been done in Africa. For example, in 2009, 70% of all imports were used electronic waste, and then 30% were not even functional. Then we found that the same year, 13,000 tons of e-waste were processed annually. And if you proceed on, you will find that in Nigeria, for example, you find that they import like 400,000 tons of e-waste. That is in 2016. In South Africa, you find that only 11% of e-waste is recycled. And in my country, Kenya, you find that only about 10% of e-waste is formally recycled, meaning that about 9% we cannot even account for it. And now when you look at the composition of e-waste, you find that 60% of e-waste is metals. Then we also have like plastics, which takes like 19%. And now when we look at these metals, we have some of the metals are very hazardous. Like a lot of work has been done on lead, and you find that it is highly, highly toxic. So I'll just carry you through some of the review of research that has been done in Africa. And you find that it is 8% of research that was done was conducted only in 3 countries. And this is Ghana, Nigeria, and you find also Botswana and South Africa. And you find just a little percent that has been done in other countries, including my country. And this has just been because you find that research on e-waste is not supported. And for you to carry out research, you need financial support. This research that was carried out mainly covered 6 key areas, and these were on health, environment, livelihood, recycling, awareness, and policy. And you find that a lot of publication, actually like 7 papers were done in about health, and then a lot of also work has been done on livelihood. And then we also have some work which was done on awareness and recreation. So I'll just carry you through some of the research work that has been done across Africa. And when I talk about the research that has been done, we are looking at research that has been published in peer-reviewed journals. So we may have some research that has been done but has not been published. So that one, it means that now people cannot really get to know what is happening. So it is important that we publish a lot of work so that people can actually understand what is happening so that we get a solution to our problems. On human health, of course, we found that people working and living around the dump sites had all manner of health effects. Some had respiratory diseases, some had cancer, and the people who had been publishing these papers, I've included them here in case you need some references. Then you find also workers. Of course, you find that some of these toxic materials also enter through their skin. And then it has been clear that where we have poor recycling activities, you find that also health effects have been associated with it. There has also been various adverse health effects that has been reported by various researchers, and most of them, for example, a research that was done in 2017 showed that there was increased instances of cancer in communities that were living near the recycling. This is informal recycling. Symptoms of neuropathy, infant mortality, decreased mental capacity, and so forth were seen around these communities that were living near e-waste informal recycling. And then when you come to, let's say, our solid wastes, you find that most of our solid wastes are not managed properly, and this also includes residues from the e-waste. And you find that 50% of the e-waste workers suffered from chest pains, respiratory infections, because of, for example, getting access to some of the variables within the dump site. Then we also looked, the research across Africa also looked at e-waste on environment. And of course, like you can see from these photos, without a lot of explanation, you can see that this smoke that is being produced as a result of burning some of these materials associated with e-waste, for example, the cable monitors, they actually produce are good sources of dioxins, furans, and heavy metals, and these ones have been associated with cancer. Then there is also some research that was done in informal sector. This was carried out I carried out this particular research, and we find that the lead levels were actually more than what is expected. It was 10 times of what is actually supposed to be recreated. Then we also had a lot of high levels of lead in the soils near the residential areas, and these residential areas were near the recycling companies. When it came to recycling of e-waste, you find that e-waste is mainly recycled by unregulated and inefficient informal sector. You can see some of the recycling activities. Like I said, that in most of these countries, even if they have formal recycling, you find that they can only account, let's say, for 10% of the e-waste, and the rest of the e-waste cannot be accounted for. And even when you go to the dump site, you may not find some of the valuable e-waste because they are usually recycled by the informal sector using crude methods. And these methods, you can see that they have an effect on the environment. And various researchers carried out this. And their findings were that the environment had very high levels of these toxic materials. Like here, you can see this is a very risk recycling operation. Researchers also carried out this, and they found that it had very high levels of lead, mercury, cadmium. These are some of the heavy metals that they found. So the issue here, again, we have some researchers who looked at regulatory framework and policies in the region, and they found that actually there is lack of regulatory framework and policies, because whatever regulatory framework we have is generally for hazardous waste, but you find that for e-waste, we do not have any regulatory framework in most of these countries. And a lot of research, of course, if you want some references, I've quoted here, you find that, for example, if you went to Ghana, let's say dump site, you'd find that it receives like 15% of e-waste, and it covers over 20% of land. That is 20 acres, of land. And in this case, you find we have crude recycling, like you've seen here. And this, of course, had an effect also on the environment and human health. Then there are some researchers also who carried out research on awareness, raising, and education. And they found that generally there is low levels of awareness among the population about e-waste. In fact, one study found that over 70% of the people who participated in their study, they found that 71% of these participants were not aware that in Nigeria they have a formal recycling facilities to treat their wastes. Then also, of course, we have also low awareness in terms of local capacity, or let's say officials or legislation or enforcement. You find that we do not have actually awareness, like where can you take your e-waste when, for example, you need to dispose it off. Then again, it was found that most of these recycling activities are also found within the communities, and this is just to do with the regulations and policies are not there. So you find some of this informal recycling takes place within the residential areas, and also some researchers have mentioned that. Like you can see some of these pictures, we have children in school, and then you can see here we have also children which are just playing with the computer, which was discarded. And of course, you know that children are very vulnerable to some of these toxic materials. Then, of course, there was some research that was also carried out about e-waste and livelihood. And of course, it is very important to note that if we have policies and infrastructure, recycling of e-waste actually can generate a lot of income. But because we do not have formal recycling companies, so you find that in most of these countries, they actually have really big problems. But if, for example, we have good infrastructure, you find that, for example, in Ghana, 25% of computers were donated to the schools. And then you find that recyclers also earned some money, which contributed to their GDPs. And then you find that still the dump site in Ghana employs about 15,000 workers to recover the precious metals. Then, of course, collectors of this e-waste, for example, along this value chain also earn some more money compared to other informal sector. So in terms of livelihood, of course, e-waste actually changes people's lives. I carried out also research to find out willingness to pay for treatment of e-waste in 2015. I don't know if the situation has changed now. And we found that 85% of the participants also said no, they cannot pay for the treatment of their e-waste, but they can pay for their normal e-waste because they believe that e-waste has a lot of money. Then you find that about 10% of the participants said they are actually willing to pay for e-waste. Then 5% said they don't know, because maybe awareness also creation is still low in some of these places. Then I also carried out a survey here in Kenya, and we found that 32% of the population says that there is no recreation to take care of e-waste. Another 6% talked about costs, that is very expensive to manage e-waste. Then 44% said there is no recycling facilities. Despite the fact that we have our former recycling facilities, 44%, then that is 2015. I don't know if the situation has changed. They said that they don't know whether there is a formal recycling facilities. Then 15% said that there is lack of infrastructure and awareness within recycling companies. Although now there are some successful stories. For example, we have student youth-focused technical startups that are helping in terms of taking care of this e-waste. In Ghana, for example, we have people who are engaged, a company which was engaged in peeling up 3D printers using e-wastes. And then we also, of course, we recognize that there are many innovators that are coming out in terms of management of e-waste. And some countries actually are at a high level in drafting regulatory framework and policies. So how do we support circular economy? I'll just go very fast because of time. So how do we support circular economy? Of course, from here you can see that circular economy requires financial incentives, technical support. They require innovation so that at least we can at least harvest more from the e-waste. And also capacity building and training is very important, creating awareness, repairing the e-waste so that it can be used instead of, let's say, just dumping it like that, and then recovering secondary materials. And the most important here is to have specific regulatory framework and policies so that at least the circular economy is taken care of. So what is needed, I've written a few requirements. Because of time, I'll just mention a few. We need to have regular monitoring of all sources of environment and occupational exposure, enforcement of existing legislation, building capacities among the e-waste value chain, remediation of already contaminated sites, because we have already contaminated sites, and we know that some of these heavy metals are persistent and they also bioaccumulate. So it's very important that we carry out remediation. It's very important also to have regional recycling plant. Like our speaker showed us that at least if you have large volumes of e-waste, then we can benefit from regional recycling plants so that at least e-waste can be recycled in an environmental sound manner. Then we need also strategies, for example, for take-back schemes, partnering with other farms, institutions, extended producer responsibility is very necessary, and I'm sure all these, most of them have been covered by our speakers as well. Then the most important thing also to ensure that we have maximum collection of e-waste so that it's taken to the formal recycling plants. There are also some key points because we've seen that the impact of e-waste on human health and environment has been carried out by researchers. So informal recycling is ineffective, especially in polluting, let's say, and harming the environment. So the informal e-waste workers, of course, earn more than other informal sector. So if we can integrate informal and formal sector through value chain of e-waste management, this would be very, very important in management of our e-waste, and also reducing the amount of hazardous materials in the e-products will actually help so that we don't harm our environment and human health. The references for the research that has been carried out, because this was simply a review that was carried out, if you need more detail, you can refer to that. And therefore, I say thank you for this opportunity.